if I gave you a quick introduction to part of the system, and I'm just going to go over what is kind of the underpinnings, and then how it's used daily in a classroom, and then make it clear how we use it in a remote teaching environment. So just to be really clear, this is all about developing skills and habits in students. And I think now more than ever, with students trying to learn largely in isolation, that we really need to figure out a way that we can incorporate practice with the skills that research has shown to really move the needle for students. So if you look at this last line here, skills like time task management, note-taking, assignment completion strategies, we could do that with this system in a remote setting. This is kind of what the system's really about, helping students develop the non-cognitive skills, strategies, attitudes, and behaviors that are the hallmark of effective learners. And if we do, we can improve student learning and course performance while also increasing the likelihood that students will be successful in college. And if you want any of this research, I'd be more than willing to share it with you. And this is the point with Organized Binder, is there's never a lesson on these skills and habits, these non-cognitive skills or executive functions that research is very clear about. We embed it into the routine of the day. And so what I've seen happen with my first year in an online independent study or remote teaching learning environment was that it can very quickly devolve down to just getting through your to-do list. If I get through my stuff, then I'm done. Or if I get through this packet, then I'm done. And I think we can all say very safely that that's just not necessarily learning. So if we can embed kind of a rhythm or a routine to the workday for students, the school day, we can actually help them be more successful and give them exposure to these skills. So everyone, every student would have one of these. It's a binder, as you can see, with tabs. And inside the binder, there's a guide. That's the guide for coaches. There's one for parents. There's one for educators. And each of those tabs just simply open up to...
Are you sharing a screen right now?
Yeah. Can you not see my screen?
We're
Thanks, Tucker.
seeing you.
You're seeing me?
Yeah.
That's not what I wanted. Thank you, Tucker.
Yeah.
It bounced me. What do you see now?
Boom.
There you go.
Now we got it.
I could have been talking the whole time, and you're looking right at me. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Here's what I was talking about. Here's the research, and if you're interested in any of this research, by all means, let me know, and I'll show you. That would have been a really boring time for you. So that's an organized binder, and the tabs in the binder obviously it opened up like this, and there's guides. They exist digitally and in analog, and each of those tabs would open up to these various aspects or pages in organized binder. And what we would do in any training is just kind of show you the daily sequence, and I'm going to do that with you. Each of these, this is kind of the rhythm in a classroom routine, that we would start on that weekly lifeline, quickly turn to this agenda and table of contents. On occasion, look at this academic toolkit, and then we begin and end class or the school day with this weekly lifeline, and I'll talk briefly about those. And in between that time, students have their work session, or you would have your class period or your school day. So I'm going to keep coming in and just call it the student work session, because that's how my students are using this and incorporating it in a remote environment. So if we look at how we would start the school day, it would typically be this. And if you were all in my class, I would have this presented or up in the classroom as a nonverbal visual cue that to be considered on time, you just need to be in your seat with your binder open to the correct B page in that B tab, okay, this weekly lifeline. And we call this a kickoff, and I want to talk about this because I think it's really important in a remote environment, is that the way we introduce this to students is to say that you would never show up to a game, a soccer game or something, and start the game defined by when you show up to the game, right? You get there and you get your cleats on and you warm up and you wait for the other team to get ready, and you take and then there's this kickoff, right? There's this time where we get ready, and the same thing needs to happen and is true for learning. Like what does it look like? How do I know when I'm ready to engage and I'm ready to learn? And what's really helped my students in a remote environment is just having that cue, like, okay, I'm not just going to log back online and start getting my work done. I'm going to start with this kickoff, and the kickoff is always a prompt that that's delivered by the teacher, or typically is. It gives me the chance to authentically revisit and reteach the previous day's objective or standard. And students record the prompt and they respond to it. So this B5, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, that's the 5th week of school, or the 5th week the system's being used. So they're going to have one of these per week. And so we're creating basically a study guide as we're going through the semester. And I thought I would just show you real quick what it looks like in a classroom. This is a middle school class up in Northern California in Redding. I forget the subject. This is one of our trainers, and you'll hear them kind of milling around or getting ready for the kickoff, just like on any game. And then you'll hear the bell ring, and I'm not going to play the whole video, but just kind of listen and notice the kind of affect change in the class. So this is before the class. You may not be able to see it, but that's the kickoff that's projected up there. But the prompt is not yet shown.
Mitch, we don't have audio, or at least I don't.
Really? That's too bad. Well, it sounds like you don't have audio. I wonder what's going on here. So if I could say, and what you would have seen there is, and this is Sharon. Thought it'd be fun to put you in there, Sharon. Sorry to put you on the stage, but it gives a chance for direct instruction and a chance to just clear up any misconceptions. So if you're looking over your curriculum and you're really kind of aiming at like, okay, what are those misconceptions, and giving students a chance to get them clarified. And as you can see, students are recording that prompt and responding to it. If you look closely there, that's this is an elementary class in Cleveland, and it's just a wider ruled version of the system. And I want to make this clear. This is not a quiz. It's meant to be interactive. Students engaging with one another, engaging with the class, with the teacher. And we end it with this check. You'll notice there's no score. It's just a kickoff. It's how we start our class or our learning session. And at the end, they check themselves by writing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that checkbox, which is a simple metacognitive practice, a reflection, a self-assessment, and a formative assessment for the teacher. So if I was in a classroom, I'm walking around just getting a snapshot of where students believe they are in terms of mastering whatever it is that we're reviewing, which ideally is the previous day's objective or standard. Now in the remote teaching environment, if you could look here, I took a screenshot of my class's curriculum. And anything that says new on this slide is things that I've embedded into the existing curriculum. And it's not unlike if I had a textbook and I could rip it all apart and put stuff in there to make it better. But in my first unit, I'm a biology teacher, by the way, so you see Study of Life. We have a binder set up. So each of my students have an organized binder. And then the kickoff question. And it's the exact same thing. It's actually been a lot of fun. As I deliver the prompt, I embed it into this sequence. So as they're online and clicking through, they see that prompt and they're recording it on their weekly Lifeline, responding to it. And then at the end of the week, it's the same rhythm and routine, but they're taking this digital interface now and actually writing and creating something that they can look back on. They take a picture of it and they upload it to me so I can read and check out their kickoffs. I'll talk about the end of the work session in a moment. So that's an example of the kickoff. Here's one when we're doing cardio. So it's the exact same rhythm to the day. You don't just jump in you actually have a chance to reflect, and all of them get stored in their organized binder so that when they get to the end of an 18-week semester, they have 18 weeks worth of these prompts and responses that they can look back on. Again, keep your questions coming in the chat. I just want to get this intro out. This is, again, the typical sequence. We begin class with this weekly Lifeline, and we end there. So since we're talking about this page, I'm going to go ahead and discuss this real quick. In the same way that we start with a kickoff, which is really a reflection, we end the school day or the class period or the work session with a reflection on what I've learned today, what I just did. And I've really liked this prompting for my students because, again, it takes them beyond the to-do list. Don't just stop when you've got all your work done. Like, have a moment to reflect. And you're really just having a one-on-one conversation with the teacher. Again, they're going to upload a picture of this weekly Lifeline so I can read them. And in our guides, there's pages of prompts that help parents or teachers or whoever's using the system articulate a prompt for students that helps them reflect in a metacognitive way and not just say, well, here's what I did today during my work session. So they're really just having a one-on-one conversation with me where they can talk about what was confusing, maybe what they learned. I'm reading and can respond back to those on a weekly basis. So what it allows for is that kind of beginning and end to the work session. And I want to draw your attention to this last sentence here. Elaboration is the process of giving new material meaning by expressing it in your own words and connecting it with what you already know. And that's the learning log. It's trying to pause and have you express what you're learning in your own words. Again, don't just rush through your to-do list or get your packet done. Have some time of reflection, or as Ferrari says, cognition. That liberating education consists in acts of cognition, not transfers of information. And by the way, one of the caveats is that you practice your academic language. Doesn't matter what subject it is or what grade level it is. And every time you write a learning log or a kickoff, if it's appropriate, you're practicing academic language, okay, complete sentences. And then where this is all based is, if you're familiar with Marzano's research, it's all about exposures. So when you show up for your work session or your class or your school day, whatever you're doing during that time is your first exposure to this content. And then at the end of that work session, if we were in a remote environment, you're going to reflect on what you've learned. And then when you come back the next time, whether it's the next day or it could even be the day at whenever, before you dive right back in and keep progressing through the class, there's this kickoff that allows us to reflect. So we're increasing the number of times that students have exposures to the content, which is what increases retention and helps them learn, okay? So I've added those green terms there, if you could see, the reflect on either side of that work session. And then we got to make a plan, okay? So I'm going to show you before they jump into their work session, and this is the C tab, is just to quickly, for the subject or the grade level, not their whole day, like what, based on what the curriculum's saying, what's your plan? Get a game plan. And I'm going to prompt you to look for some larger upcoming assignments you put on there. But I'm looking here at my unit 1 or my week scope, whatever it is, and I'm starting to create a plan and I'm going to execute on it. Okay, again, not just running through my to-do list. So it could be things like this where there's other larger upcoming assignments. And I prompt my students on this to have it on their agenda so that they can start to, as they're progressing through the week, create a map or a plan for themselves to execute on. This is specific for the class, okay? And that can work in conjunction with a planner, whether it be ours or some other planner, where now they're looking at time and task management, which is paramount for success at the college level, of course. But working on time and task management, but starting in a scaffolded way with that agenda, like just what's your plan for today? Or maybe the week, what are you gonna do based on this class so that you have a plan and you can execute, okay? So we start with that reflection, make a plan, and then very quickly we get organized. So this is the table of contents. I don't know if any of you took advantage of the free download. If you haven't and you're interested, go to the website. There's one for families and teachers. But every assignment, and these are physical pieces of paper, whether they're torn out of a consumable, whether they're printed and 3-hole punched, whether they're binder paper, every organized binder comes with 50 sheets of binder paper each semester, so 100 total. And I'll explain how I use it in a digital environment. But I wanted you to see here that all of these, there's no dividers when it comes to content. This system helps capture unit lesson planning, okay, or units of curriculum. So it doesn't matter if it's notes or a worksheet or a lab report or an essay or a quiz. If it has to do with unit 1, it would go behind the table of contents. And all students do is simply write that number in the upper right-hand corner, okay? Very simple, and file it behind the table of contents. In my class, and if you would follow these 2 arrows, a lot of what I'm doing, because I can't necessarily depend on students, their ability to print in 3-hole punch. Their family may not have a printer. So we use that binder paper a lot, and I'm focusing on note taking. So as they're going through the unit and all of these lessons, which are there digitally, they're learning to take really good notes and have that behind their table of contents. And there are some other things that they have in the table of contents as well, but largely it's notes. So they're working on that skill because they have the binder paper and they can do that. And then at the end of the unit, this simply becomes a cover sheet, and all of their work would be behind it. And we staple it together to make these unit packets. And the whole point is, at the end of the course, or at the end of this quarantine, which would be a short packet because we're getting close to being done, students would have all of their work neatly chunked in thematic unit packets that they can look at to study for unit exams as well as final or summative assessments. And then they leave the class with a portfolio of their learning. I took this picture in Sharon's class where all of her students will have a portfolio when they leave her 9th grade transition class, okay? And what it really becomes is like a trophy. This is one of Greg's students, one of my favorite pictures of all time. In that sense, that sense of pride, I don't know, Sharon, Greg, if you want to, can you say anything about to that real quick?
It's just amazing. I mean, I teach at a non-public school with tier 3 students that are really struggling learners. This kid, Naveen, we couldn't even get him out of his house. He wasn't attending school. He wouldn't leave his house. So we had to go coax him out of the house. It took a week or 2. And then, he was really scared in the classroom. And this is after, working 6 months or a year or so with Organized Binder. And he's like one of our greatest Organized Binder students ever. And it's just because we gave him that tool, and that's what's so important about Organized Binder. It's just a really important tool that students learn how to use, and maybe at a different level of learning later in life, they'll be able to access and use a different kind of tool. It's just using that tool and then developing the responsibility, feeling that sense of responsibility and pride that goes along with it, with being able to use and master a tool, which this kid really did. And so that smile does say all that.
Cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. One of the things that haunted me my first year as an online independent study teacher was we got to the end of the year and my students didn't have anything to show for it. Everything was embedded in this online curriculum, and they've moved on from the course and they can't access it anymore. So all of the academic and, for me, scientific skills and literacy that they're going to build on in chemistry and physics or whatever the subsequent classes are, they didn't have anything to look back on. And one of the things that's really important with this is, so we reflect, we make a plan, and we get organized. And it just takes a few minutes. This is not a lot of time. But you also have to build this toolkit. And that's the trophy piece. And this is anything in a course that is not unit-specific work. So it's populated with tools and resources that throughout the entire school year, they're going to need to be successful in that class. And that's why I want that kind of trophy element or that portfolio that they would leave with at the end of the school year. So we begin with a reflection. We set a plan. We get organized. On occasion, we add to the toolkit, certainly not every day. And then you get to work. And at the end of that, before you close up and run out to hopefully go play and do something fun outside, there's a reflection. Okay? And so it's absolutely mimicking what's happening in a class. It can be done at home with a parent. It could be done through a digital environment as well, but it works really well to move beyond the to-do list in a remote learning environment. That's how it's used daily. It's really, if you look at that as a classroom context, the most historically underutilized class time are the first few minutes and the last few minutes. And Organized Binder has tried to kind of exploit that for learning, for teaching and learning. But in between that time, teachers have complete autonomy to do what they do. And if it's a work session, same thing for students, if they're working with tutors, if they're working with parents, or again, if it's a remote environment through digital means. And for districts, and Sharon, I can point out to Sharon's district, this transition, I was talking with their superintendent, they have a 15% open rate. So if you look at remote learning through an equity lens, it can't all be ed tech. It just can't all be digital because so many students don't have access. So if you had, and I know most of us, even for Greg and Sharon who use this system, if we had a chance, so if we don't, there's hints of us not going back in the fall. If we had Organized Binder in place, I could start to develop a curriculum that of course I could deliver online, which is, it's amazing, right? Online solutions are amazing. But for those that don't have access, I could text. There's an interesting research that's come out of Stanford that text messaging is the most reliable way to get through to most parents because everybody has a phone. I could text, I could call, or I could even snail mail home some curriculum if I had time to plan and engage, to make sure I engage all students. So there's some other aspects. I'm just going to show them to you. There's a goal setting component. So periodically throughout the school year, having students set a goal with an actionable daily task, so break it down for them so they can execute on their goals. There is a time to check in every few weeks and go away from this. This is what's really interesting is a lot of parents were the first to, like within I would say about the second or third week of this quarantine, we started hearing from a lot of parents just, I think because of the name Organized Binder, like this stuff's starting to pile up if it's not just all online. And if you notice, every assignment, every tool, those weekly lifelines that we start, everything has a place where it goes. And when it has a place where it lives, it's more likely to find its way home. And if we stop every few weeks to organize, if the student's starting to get disorganized, we guarantee that portfolio is happening. Okay, and again, back to that portfolio. So place for a syllabus, this is more of a classroom context we can talk about. Passes. So here's my contact information. I'm actually right at 1:30. And I'm sorry, this is probably not the most interactive webinar you've ever had. But that's my personal email. There's our website. And people old Organized Binder people, go check it out. There's a new website up as of a couple weeks ago. If you're on any social channels, that's our handle. But I want to end, I always end with this, that simply raising standards in our schools without giving students the means of reaching them is a recipe for disaster. Just pushes the poorly prepared or poorly motivated students into failure and out of school. And this is just so critical during this time, supporting students, especially the poorly prepared or poorly motivated. So I'm going to go back to my contact, but I'm going to jump out of here. Does anybody have any questions for me? Kind of throwing a lot at you, I know, but I thought it'd be helpful to give you some context of how it's used and then show how it can be used in a remote learning environment. So where's my chat? Any questions for me?
How do you do your binder checks in a remote situation like that? Do they take pictures or what do they do?
Yeah, so I could have put that in there, but that would be, by the way, the reason I didn't go through all of them is just the sake of time, but I've done it a couple ways. We've done Zoom content area discussions where I have my sample and we can go through it. There's also a really cool ed tech tool called Flipgrid, where they can kind of show that same way, record a video and put it up there. So, all right, thanks for the kind comments. This is, if you look in the chat, and this is really for Miss Allen, Suzanne, and Stacy, because I can hunt the other 3 down. I know them. But if you want to meet one-on-one and talk about your context, what might be helpful, have me slow down a little bit, and and maybe you could even hear some audio. I would love to chat with you. We could just jump on a Zoom call at some point. So I just put a very simple form. I think it just asks for your first and last name, and then if you want to give an alt email or phone number. So any other questions? You can say them out, or you can chat them in here. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Can you give me and be honest about this? Is it pretty helpful, medium, overwhelming? Give me some feedback. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
This was good. I haven't seen it for at least a year, Mitch.
Okay.
But I had seen it, so there's that part of it. And I'll talk to you offline. The part that, like the online part, I'm still trying to sort of. There's pieces of it that I get how you're explaining it, like how you use how you use the tool in an online environment. And there's parts that I'm still wrapping my head around.
Sure. Good.
So.
Yeah. Okay. And Tucker, to that point, like it is easier when our school uses one. We're not doing like Google Classroom and School Loop, and because we're all kind of like patching this thing together right now. So the transition for my school was much smoother because we were already an online independent study environment. So, any other? Sharon?
Yeah, so if you haven't seen this before, and I noticed that Greg typed it in there too, it's one of the most amazing things in the classroom. And the transformation, we all want to think we're doing a really good job in the classroom, which everybody is and putting there, but the transformation in my classroom was amazing when I started using this. I mean, I can't speak highly enough to it. Completely different. And the one thing I've noticed too in having that is for some of my kids, that was their only good grade, was having their binder, and it was organized, and they got their full points for that because that was the only thing I could get them to do in a day or in a period. And I have high school transition kids who are struggling learners. And then at the end of the year, when they got to take that home, I don't know if the rest of you will look at trash cans, but you'll notice almost everything's thrown in the trash can. I very rarely found any binders in the hall trash cans. So.
That's that trophy piece, right? That the pride.
It is.
And we could talk for again, those of you newer to this, we could talk about this through a teacher lens and how it structures curriculum, how it helps with time and task management in a classroom setting, behavior management. And we can also talk about parent engagement. So if you're a school leader looking at engaging parents in a way that's not solely tied to content, but is a classroom context, can be really powerful. So grab that form. I'm not going to hound you. So if you want to hear from me, I'll follow up with you, but there's no sales pitch here or anything like that. We don't have a newsletter. So you signed up, probably, we're not going to spam you, none of that. So I really appreciate you all being here, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Mitch.
All right. That was fun. There'll be another one next week. We're going to do one of these a week. So, all right, everybody. Sharon and Greg, that was super cool of you to show.
Thank you. Hey, I'm going to be in touch because they're changing my class setup and format for next year, and I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around how I'm going to keep organized binder going. Like, kids are going to be flowing in and out of my room now instead of a set classroom.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'd like to get in touch with you and pick your brain on ideas.
Guess who I might rope into that conversation? That guy right next to you there, Greg, because he that's pretty common for you, right, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
That would be great if you guys wouldn't mind. We're still kind of working out the details, so until I kind of know what it's going to be like, but right now that's what they're talking about. Kids flowing in and out for either days or a week at a time or whatever. And so it's going to be a new challenge.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to be a part of that.
All right,
Okay.
Sharon, will you ping me just so I don't get it lost in the shuffle?
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Bye.
All right, I'm gonna sign off. I'll talk to you soon, Greg.
Image.
All right, buddy.